Hi, everyone. Welcome to Mother's Intuition. Sorry, a bit of technical difficulties with the mute button again. That pesky button, if you're not paying attention. So I'm back again today. Sam's right here. With both kiddos. So that's fun. No nap time today, which happens. But it's mom life, you know. Speaking of which, yesterday I did a video. I'm going to try Mondays to do a Mom Life Monday. So stay tuned for those. Just some fun little mom tips. Once again, I'm not trying to say my way is the best way. Just trying to help you out in any way you can in your mom life because it's the best life, but it can be a challenge. So I'm here today to talk to you about the education system. If you're not familiar, I used to be a public school teacher for 5 years before I had my first. And I'm so blessed that my husband encouraged me to stay home with my girls. But I just want to give my humble opinions on our education system. Good job. And just how it fails our children. And I pray that things can get better and will get better for the majority of the kids in our country who have to go to the public school system. So quick prayer to our Mother Mary, asking for our guidance for our children and our lives as moms to give our kids the best lives possible. In the name of the Father, and the Son, and the Holy Spirit. Hail Mary, full of grace, the Lord is with thee. Blessed art thou among women, and blessed is the fruit of thy womb, Jesus. Holy Mary, Mother of God, pray for us sinners, now and at the hour of our death. Amen. My 2-year-old knows the Hail Mary. It's wonderful. It melts my heart every time. Okay, so I'm going to try to do this quick because so we'll see how it goes. So and I already did this once. So I'm just going to start with my journey as a teacher. I went to one of the universities around here in Michigan for my college degree, and I graduated after doing my student teaching in a elementary school. I did student teaching and teacher assisting, and that's a year-long thing you have to do in Michigan to become a teacher. My teacher assisting was in 2nd grade. My student teaching was in 4th grade. I really enjoyed both experiences, but I knew after doing those both that I preferred the older kids versus teaching the young little ones, which is ironic now because the little ones. But I really did. I really liked teaching the older kids in school. It's definitely where I found my calling, especially since I graduated with integrated science. I really wanted to teach the science to the older kids. It's much more fun to me. I really like being able to have conversations with kids and being able to reach things at that higher level versus teaching the basics and ABCs and manners and things like that, which is where I am now. So, life takes it full circle. So my first job, Michigan was really full in terms of teachers when I graduated. And so there were very little available jobs at the time. So I had some college friends that went to like Arizona, Utah, maybe Tennessee too. I actually, funnily, I applied in Alaska and Florida, and I got job offers in both. I went with Florida, which is good because my husband went with me. So that was wonderful. We talked about that in our first video. Went to Florida together. And we both were able to develop in our careers there. And so my first job, I got job offers from both middle school and elementary schools because down there they have these big counties, big county districts, I should say. So in Michigan, I'm not sure about where you're from, but in Michigan, we have small school districts, which are kind of a county divided up into all these tiny little, basically every town has its own school district. There's pros and cons of that. I might hit to that later. In Florida, they have the whole county is one big school district. So it was really nice applying to jobs because I literally just go to the big district county office and talk to the human resources recruiting person. And they're able to hook me up with all these different schools and from across the whole county. So that was really nice. Made it a lot easier to find a job. So I got several different job offers. I picked middle school. And I'm so happy I did, even though it was a big challenge. My first year was super stressful. I think that's pretty normal for most teachers to have a stressful first year, just because you're not really sure what you're doing, missing school supplies, etc. Mine was a challenge because I'd never taught middle school before. I had some behavior challenges for sure, dealing with all that fun hormone stuff. But also because we had our school building was older, but we had a huge population of students. It was, I want to say 1,500 middle schoolers, just 6th, 7th, and 8th grade. And so we had a lot of teachers that actually had to be like on a cart. And I was one of them because I was a new teacher. So, you kind of get the short end of the stick as a new teacher. And so as a new teacher, I actually, for science, had to spend, it was just, I think the first quarter of the year, once they figured out eventually how to kind of move people around a bit, and I was able to get my own classroom. But before that, I had to share a classroom with somebody. And for like 2 or 3 class periods, I was actually on a cart and I had to wheel my stuff around to different other people's classrooms while they were on their planning break. I had to take over their classroom and teach in their classroom, which was really inconvenient for me and them. Like I said, I had a lot of behavioral challenges. Oh, don't stamp your shirt, Peanut. Just on paper, please. Just paper.
What is it?
Because stamps, that'll stain your shirt. Okay, just on paper, please. You have some right here. So middle school, it was fun. Like, I mean, yes, there's some big challenges. My husband actually laughs because he asked me, if we raise kids in Florida, would you send your kids there? Because I loved the teachers. I loved the principal. I was like, there's no way. There were. Okay, just use this one for now. I'll get you some new one in just a minute, okay?
No.
Okay, then you go get it. Okay, you have to hop down and you know where the paper is. So I actually said that because even though there were a lot of really good kids at that school, there were so many kids who were just really terrible, like just bad behaviors, really awful. I mean, I can't even begin to describe it. And I think that's kind of just the way it is because of the fact that it was such a big school. It's kind of hard to, I mean, you're going to have kids from all different levels and walks of life and everything. And I mean, it's not like I disliked really very many of the kids in general. Woo, careful. Are you ice skating?
Yeah.
And I just in general felt like it's so hard in middle school, especially when you have kids with all these different life experiences. They're exposed to all these different things. The kids are growing up a lot faster nowadays than they used to. And I think that's just part of our culture, an unfortunate part of our culture. And one of the other reasons why I would only send my children to not even all Catholic schools, but specifically, one of our Catholic schools nearby or homeschool, because there's too many things going on, and parents, a lot of them aren't aware enough of what their kids are doing, and it's forcing kids to grow up a lot faster, and they think they're grown up and they're really not. It's really sad. It's just something I really noticed in middle school. Teaching in public school in general, I mean, you have to deal with a lot of issues like funding and things like that, lack of school supplies. There were a lot of things that I think went well in Florida and when I taught back here in Grand Rapids. But a lot of difficulties you have to deal with as well, like not enough school counselors, especially in Michigan with elementary school, not enough supplies half the time. When I taught regular science education, I was always short on supplies versus when I taught in our academy. We had a pre-medical academy for middle school, which was really fun. The parents were asked to make like a little donation at the beginning of the year to help out with additional supplies for those advanced classes. So we actually had a lot more stuff to be able to use in our classroom than I did when I just taught regular education. Now I'm going to hit some of the really big flaws that are just a problem in our system in general that I think are part of this huge broken system. I'll start with the poor funding aspect. So as I mentioned, the counties, just use your other ones for now. I'll pick it up in a second. The counties in Florida were a lot different than here in Michigan. In Michigan, we have small counties, small districts, I should say, that are based on each individual little community. So I live in a rural area right now. And so our little rural town, as well as the neighboring 5 or 6, all have their own little tiny school district. And that has its pros because, number one, you're part of this little close-knit community, but there's a few big cons with that as well, which is, rural communities like farming communities, we don't have much money. So there's not a lot of extra funds being pumped into our school district. So a lot of times you'll find that the rural districts or the inner city ones have a big lack of funding compared to the areas, and you all probably have one near you, that have the wealthy, affluent people. So we have, I'd say, 2 or 3 big communities around us, which are public school communities. But since they have the big, affluent, giant mansion houses, that's where the big buck funding goes. And that's the way it's been in districts around the country for a long time. If you live in the affluent community, even though it's a public education system, you get the additional tax dollar funding from the community compared to the inner city or the rural areas. So just the distribution of funds. Number one, those big wealthy communities can afford to pay their teachers better. So they have a much higher demand for jobs, and the teachers are constantly wanting to get into those communities because it pays a lot better. But also just the amount of supplies that the teachers can get, the technology available to the students. It's just a huge difference. And then not to mention sporting equipment and availability. And that's just a huge difference. But in Florida, it was, like I said, one big county. So we had Palm Beach County, huge area. So it's, very populated down in West Palm Beach. So these giant counties, which are just filled with people, packed to the brim, have one big school district, which has its disadvantages because the number one, like I said, it's not one little close-knit community. It's this giant, massive conglomerate school district. So definitely teachers, schools, students can all get lost in the shuffle. So that's one big disadvantage, I would say, of the large school district, is that people get lost in the shuffle very easily. The teachers do, the staff do, and policies are hard to write because you're dealing with such a large, diversified population, both the rural and populated area. But one of the big advantages is that the funding is a lot easier to distribute. So every school, for the most part, has equal amounts of funding and available resources, which made it a lot easier to do things like these academies we had down in Florida. In middle school, we had these cool, specific job-oriented academies. So there was culinary academy at one of the schools. For middle school, there's nurses, like I said, pre-medical. There was, I think one had a teaching type thing. So there's these actual specific job type trainings that kids can get into even in middle school. And then there's the art school, the music school. And I just thought it was so wonderful that we had these specific trade-based programs that kids could get into in middle school. Now, I'm not saying a middle schooler knows they want to be in the medical community, but it was just nice because some kids just loved science. So they got a whole extra science period in their day compared to the rest of the students. So number one, it helps them, even if they were a mid to low level student, this kid is giving a whole extra science period a day. So even some of my lower performing kids would just in general had such a higher aptitude for science. And by their 8th grade year, we're just so much more advanced in science. And then it got them on the fast track in high school. So even the average student could really benefit from these programs, which I thought was amazing. And then of course, the kids who were really on the fast track, intelligence wise, really went a lot faster too. So like I said, though, there's definitely pros and cons to both. I don't know which one I would say is better. My inkling is I like the big county a little bit better, but like I said, there was definitely flaws. So funding in general is a big problem in our country. It needs to be resolved. And I'm not sure, I don't know the answers to all these questions. All I really can say is I think in general, our whole education system needs to be cut apart to pieces and rebuilt from the get-go. I just think there's nothing we can do at this point to fix the flaws that are so deeply set in. I don't know if it's starting over and just doing state by state, letting them all do their own school districts. I don't know if it's mandating things from the United States government level. I think, my husband always talks about the fact that, public education is a big risk anyway. He always is like, everyone should just do homeschool. Well, it's easier said than done, but in a way there'd be some big benefits to that because things being run from the government level are definitely having some big drawbacks and draining our teachers and our poor students who have to go through these systems. Some other big issues that I have with the education system. Number one, the people running it at the federal level are just always awful. A lot of people give Betsy DeVos such a hard time. And I know, she's from Michigan. I know she's probably trying her best and doing what she thinks is best, but I've never been really happy with whoever is in that position at the federal level because they're never a teacher. They're never someone who's actually been in the classroom. And I just think that's such a disadvantage to everyone in our country when you have someone who's never been a teacher standing in that position. And I get it. It's easier said than done, but I think we need to definitely fix that if we're going to continue with the current system, but I still think it needs to change. Other things that need to change, the way teachers are evaluated, terrible. In Florida, it was based on, and Michigan, it's based on partially on testing. And in Florida, I was a science teacher. But my evaluation was based on the reading scores. So I know I teach reading. I know it's important to teach my kids reading, but it's still, these tests are so hard for kids to do. And it was just so unfair that, you know, our scores are based on this arbitrary reading test, which I disagree with completely. It was changing, but very slowly. So testing, I've mentioned this in a previous video of why I went to homeschool. It was just an exhausting portion of the school year. I feel like it was a whole third of our school year was just devoted to testing. Good idea. I'm almost done, okay?
So I can play on my place.
Okay. She wants to play in our play set. It's kind of a nice day outside. So yeah, testing, you know, we had our countywide testing as well as the state testing, and we had to reorganize these classroom schedules, and it just took up huge blocks of time. The students were exhausted. We were exhausted. And on top of that, we still had our own teacher-based tests. Like I still had to give my students assessments based on the content I was teaching them in the class, you know, throughout the school year. So it was just exhausting. And then elementary school, same thing. These kids are way too young and just having to stare at this computer screen for hours, taking this excruciatingly long test. And they were just exhausted by it. It was exhausting for us and for them. Such a waste of time. I never feel like you get the data you want to in terms of what do they actually know, because some of the questions are just so poorly written. And some tests, you didn't even, as a teacher, get to see the question. So it doesn't really help you to know, was the question just bad? Or is it something I literally have to reteach my students? Because they would just give you a list of what standard it was, and then how many of your students missed it. Well, it doesn't help you if the question's a poor question. I could go on and I could do a whole video on testing. It's just awful. It needs to change. Another thing that needs to change at the whole level is how teachers get raises. I mean, it's based on sometimes it's based on unions and how well your union does to represent you. But a lot of the time, this is one thing, I mean, just as a perspective of someone who's worked in other jobs besides teaching, you know, in the restaurant biz. I mean, I hate to compare it to a restaurant worker, but anyway, as a waitress, I get tips for the most part based on how well I serve my tables. You'll get the occasional table, of course, that just is a bad tipper. But for the most part, if you do a great job serving, your table is going to give you a great tip. Well, in the business world, it's the same way, right? If you are top of your game at your firm, or if you are the best doctor, or if you are the best employee at I don't know, drawing a blank here. If you're the best employee at a book editing company, or you have put in the most number of years and you're the best editor, you're going to get paid the best because you do the best job. I'll help you in just a minute, okay? Or if you can climb up here, I can help you. But in the education system, it's not based on that. But before I really got into education, you got raises based on how long you've been employed. The end. I mean, somewhat based on your evaluation, but for the most part, it was the unions based on how long you've been employed. So every year you worked, you theoretically got a raise. Now, this hasn't worked like this. Okay. It hasn't worked like that in a long time. When I started teaching, I mean, I got like a 1% raise, I think, one time, but teachers used to get raises every year and just for existing in the school for another year. I feel like that is such a waste of time because there were teachers who were paid so well, you know, near retirement age when I started, you know, just disgustingly well. And I'm like sitting here, they don't do anything. They leave when the bell rings. You have them on the wrong feet, Peanut. They leave when the bell rings. They are not doing anything. They're not trying to help their students, but they are paid ridiculously well. And that would be, they're on the wrong feet. Yep, take it off. So that was really frustrating for me. And I feel like that's not encouraging teachers to be better teachers if you're paying them based on how long they've been employed. So I think that really needs to change. And speaking of that, I said the unions. Unions are not helping teachers be better teachers. They're not helping our students at all either. In fact, I feel like most teachers join the union because they feel pressure to do it. I know I did. Union meetings ended up being just this big gripe fest about how much people hated our principal. I mean, it was just awful. I hated going to it. It was so gripey, political. It was just like this big bee fest where people just would complain constantly about, you need your socks on, love. complain constantly about their job and the fact they didn't like the principal. And I think unions are really destroying people's love of teaching, and they're not helping teachers be better teachers at all either. And then my last point is just indoctrination. If you look up a place like Madison, Wisconsin, this is happening all over our country, but here's a good example. They're letting kids, they enabled this law 2 years ago. Say hi, Lillian.
Hi.
That allows students of any age, so it includes kindergartners, to at any point tell their teacher what gender they identify as, whatever they choose. Now, this little girl here, a little angel, she has such a creative imagination, which I'm sure a lot of kids do. She 1 minute telling me she's a pony or a froggy or a bunny rabbit, which I love. She's a very imaginative young lady. In the bathtub, she's a mermaid. And sometimes she says, I'm a little boy. And then she's a little girl again. She's a kid. She's a child. They're children. Kindergartners are children. They pretend things all the time. Or they get confused and they don't really know what's going on. The point is... You have your sticker? The point is, these kids are not mature enough to decide what gender they are, but this Madison, Wisconsin decided, yes, they are. And now, because they decided that children are young enough or old enough and mature enough at any age to decide what they are in terms of gender. They have an issue where a male teacher, an elementary school male teacher, has now identified and decided that he is a woman. And, oh, don't press buttons, Peanut. He is actually fighting for his rights through the union, of course, to be able to use not only the staff women's restroom, but an elementary school children, little girls' restroom, because it's close to his classroom. And why wouldn't he, as a woman, be able to have the right to use the little child's restroom? So we have indoctrination of our students. And in Madison, Wisconsin, the teachers don't have to tell the parents that their child is identifying as a boy or girl or whatever they want to choose to be. So I guess my whole point is we have to be really careful as parents what our kids are learning in school, because, you know, you don't know what teacher your kid has. You don't know their private life. You don't know their beliefs personally. As, you know, Christians, I pray that we have more and more Christian teachers who stand behind our students and protect them. But really, I'd say, if possible, get to know your teachers and make sure they know your values as a parent, and stay involved in your kids' education. I pray that we can... I'll help you, Peanut. I'll pray that our education system changes within my lifetime. I'll help you find it in just a minute. But it's really broken right now, and I really hope that as a country we can strive for better for our children, especially through public education, because it can be such a gift to allow children to have a free education. It's just not, it's not working right now. Unfortunately, it's failing a lot of families, and I pray that it gets fixed as soon as possible. I want to end with the patron saint of education, which is Saint Francis de Sales. I don't know if I'm pronouncing that right, but he is the patron saint of education. Let's see, where is the prayer? There it is. Oh, this is a great book. It's called A Book of Saints for Catholic Moms. I love this book. If you are Catholic or not, you might want to check this one out. Humble and devout Saint Francis de Sales, you've always answered God's call in your life, even when it took you into situations that were filled with challenges. Help us to make regular prayer and Christ-like service of others a priority in our family. When we are tempted to take spiritual shortcuts or to compromise on doing the right thing, help us to remain committed to God's teaching and to look for every opportunity to follow the example of Jesus. May we recognize the many opportunities we have each day to love as Christ did and to strive for life forever with him in heaven. Amen. And we always pray to our saints as we would a friend, asking them to pray and intercede for us, and ask for Christ's blessing on our lives. So have a blessed week. Hope you have a beautiful day. Bless you and your families. Please like, share, subscribe. Check us out on Twitter. Hope to see you again soon. Bye. Say bye.
Bye.